Starting up a business is hard, really, really hard. Your chances of failure are high. You're likely to lose both your sleep and your hair. But luckily for you, you're not alone. Welcome to ET Startup School, your step-by-step guide to starting, building and consolidating your startup business idea. Your teachers at the ET Startup School will be some of India's best-known entrepreneurs, VCs and domain experts. So grab a notebook, pay close attention. School is about to start.
Today's class at ET Startup School is called How Do I Analyze the Competition? Your teacher is Rohan Bhargava, the co-founder at Cashkaro, India's fastest growing cashback and coupons site. Co-founded by Rohan and his wife Swati Bhargava in 2013, the journey of Cashkaro was driven by the couple's desire to participate in the booming Indian e-commerce economy and the success of cashback sites globally. Cashkaro entered a virgin market in India and has found success in an increasingly competitive space. And so, there's none better than Rohan to teach us about pricing, network effects, analyzing and interpreting industry trends, working with and tracking competitors, and more.
Alright, Rohan Bhargava, teacher for this class at ET Startup School. Today's class is all about how do I analyze the competition. Rohan, for this class, let's assume the following things. I have a decent startup idea. I've raised some sort of seed money, and I've convinced a few key people somehow to join me for love of money.
Yep.
Now, what's the first thing I need to know about the market that I'm going to target?
And that's a very interesting question, Suresh. In getting started, right, I think there are 4 key steps. I think the first is understanding what is the problem, right? What are you trying to solve? And does somebody really want that, right? So, for example, when we started off, our mission was, or our belief was that retailers want marketing as a problem to be solved, right? So the problem we're trying to solve is that how do you bring ROI into marketing or return on investment into marketing? The next step is that, who else is solving the problem, right? So, for example, when we think about marketing as a broader landscape, Google's doing it, Facebook's doing it. There's obviously, traditional channels of print, radio, TV. So what is the problem? Who else is sort of solving it? And then the key question, right, that comes down to is that how are you going to solve this better? So you're coming into a market, there could be incumbents or it could be a new market, right? But how are you doing this better than others? Now, when we look back at our journey, the core realization that we had, and we spoke to, our retail partners, etc. The message from them was that, look, currently the model is a cost per click model, right? So Google says that, look, if you click on my ad, I will charge you money, right? But, honestly, nobody's making money from clicks, right? Apart from Google. So we changed that model and flipped it around and said that, hey, you know what? We will charge you on a cost per sale model, right? And that is what we were saying that, look, we're going to do this differently, right? We're solving the same problem that Google is solving, but we're going to do it differently. And the last step, I believe, is to validate this problem, right? I feel that a lot of people that are about to start a business often overthink the problem. So they have like this business plan and they have, a lot of things in place, but they're constantly sort of overthinking it, right? And I think until you don't jump into it, you're not going to see what the real world looks like, right? And I think those would be my sort of 4 steps.
Rohan, I often hear VCs say that we want to back $1 billion idea. Okay, that's fine and dandy for a VC to say. As an entrepreneur, how do you figure out the potential size of a market? What metrics did you use, for instance, to estimate how big your market could be?
Yeah. It's a very, very common feedback that we get. And, we've done a couple of rounds. So we know that, even from a Series A stage, right, it was like, how big is this going to be? Now, when we started, right, and we started almost 9.5 years back in India, we were coming into a virgin market. There was no cashback in India. So obviously we couldn't have used India as a benchmark, but, luckily we had a lot of global counterparts, right? So we had seen this model evolve in the US market, in the UK market. And what we realized was that at a mature scale, affiliate businesses or performance marketing businesses are able to contribute between 15 to 20% of e-commerce, right, at scale. And that was the benchmark, right? Now, from there, we kind of projected, looked at, research that was coming out from, various bodies, right? Whether it was Google, whether it was, anyone else talking about the scale at which e-commerce is going to grow in India, the number of people that are going to be coming into the online space, Uh, and that was our benchmark, right? To figure out, look, what is the target market that we're trying to build. I think with every business, that same sort of common sense will apply, right? So in the sense that if you're trying to build a, let's say, a restaurant business, right? Now obviously the scalability of restaurant business is a little different, but then you're trying to capture what is the footfall coming in, right? So let's say, if you're trying to open up something in Cyber City, then you have a sense of what is the footfall that is coming in, right? So that becomes your target market. Within that, depending on the nature of the restaurant, right? So is it a premium luxury sort of restaurant, or is it more fast food type? You start to get a sense, right? And that's how you would start to estimate.
Do you read a lot of market research reports, and are they open source and in the free domain, or do you have to subscribe to, say, Gartner or Forrester or any of these market research firms that routinely analyze market sizes?
Honestly, I think a lot of information is available publicly, right? The beauty of media in the last sort of 5, 10 years in India has been that information is easily available. In fact, a lot of harder to get research papers are also available, right? People have sourced it, and there are these amazing startup groups on WhatsApp, etc., where you can actually get access. So I think getting access to information not a challenge. I think it's about being a little enterprising and trying to ask the question.
You said when you entered India 9 years ago with this proposition, you were in a virgin market. If I'm a startup entrepreneur, Rohan, should I enter a market with lots of players or look for a completely unexplored white space kind of market?
Honestly, it's not a straightforward answer. I think coming into a virgin market is great. The advantages are that you get the early adopters. You kind of are setting the price. Profit margins are going to be great, and you can run that way for a while, right? But you see, the reality is that very, very few businesses get to scale and not face competition, right? So, whether you're the first entrant, as you scale, competition will come. On the other hand, if you're entering into a market where there's already a lot of competition, I think you really need to be honest and look at what is it that you're able to solve for, right? So, for example, let's say if you want to build a new bank, very, very hard problem, right? There's a regulatory aspect to it, investment aspect to it, which makes entering into that market very hard, while there are a lot of inefficiencies that I think anyone can point out to. But if you're trying to enter, let's say, into the fashion space, right? I think there are new fashion boutique brands that are coming up left, right, and center. There are new restaurants coming up, right? I think we've all seen new chains come up, every month, every quarter, and I think it depends on how fragmented that market is and what are the barriers to entry. So I think it's really about understanding your market extremely well, being honest, and then really knowing what is my USP, right? If you look at a business like Zepto, if somebody went back 2 years and say, hey, you know what, we need to disrupt online grocery space. Somebody said, look, it's so crowded, right? I mean, there is a big basket of Grofers, Amazon's getting into it, Amazon Fresh is there. But they've come in and they said that, look, we will fundamentally challenge how fast we can deliver the product. So they're not playing on price. They're just playing on service, right? And I think, they're winning that game. So I think it's therefore, it really comes down to how are you approaching the problem versus incumbent, lots of competition, etc.
Rohan, there's one school of thought that says first mover advantage, you should blitz scale, you should grab as much of the market as you can, you get the early adopters. On the other hand, there's Google, which was the 14th, 15th, or 21st player in the search market. As an entrepreneur, this can be confusing. Should I enter a market if there are like 13 players there already?
It's a really, really good question. And I think it comes down to, again, what is the USP, right? How are you solving for this differently? If you look at Google's story, right? When they started off, they were essentially academics, right? And they built this most amazing, useful search algorithm, right? They were so proud of it, and they went out to Microsoft and they went out to Yahoo, and these were giants, right? And they said, look, we've solved search as a problem. Can you buy this from us? And the answer was, look, search is not the problem we're trying to solve. And out of desperation, they said, look, we'll set up Google, right? And I think the fact that they were true to saying that, look, there is a problem to be solved, and we're solving that problem, uh, is really the answer, right? So are you solving this better than anyone else out there, right? And you could then be entering a market with 10, 20, 100 people. If you're doing it better, you're going to win the game.
Rohan, when you launched Cash Karo, you said you entered a virgin market, but were there any key competitors? What was your sense of the competitive landscape, at least of the share of wallet that you were aiming for?
When we started, right, we were taking a concept that we knew was proven in the West. Uh, Ebates had done extremely well. Quidco was doing fabulous work in the UK market. Uh, and in India, there was no competition. I think that gave us a lot of comfort, a lot of luxury to kind of set up, innovate, grab the earlier sort of advantage. But competition has come, right? So as we fast forward 9 years, there is more competition, and at every stage, one has to keep innovating, right? So we initially had our core business is cash grow. Now, what we realized was that, look, there is also a whole world of resellers and influencers, and that entire ecosystem, and that led us to launch Earnkaro. Now, that has given us another lever or a way for us to create an edge over our competition. Right now, we have some of our competition now creating models that are similar to Earnkaro. The next stage is, hey, what do I now build? Right. So, at every stage, competition will come, right? And I think that is just law of nature. I don't think there's any industry where you create a business model, you're starting to make money, and people just leave you. uh, People will come after you, and you just have to keep being creative. It's the law of nature, right? It's evolution.
Now, when you launch a company like Cashkaro, there are incumbent players, let's say a bank, for instance, or let's say another financial player, for instance, or somebody else. Do you work with the incumbent players? Do you compete with them? And what happens if you start working with an incumbent player, but halfway through they develop the potential in house and ditch you? I know I'm asking you many questions simultaneously.
um, so we do work with incumbents, right? And I think something that we've realized is that it is very, very important to uh, partner, because not everyone will be able to build everything. Very early in our cycle, we realized that banks, telcos have a lot of customers. Uh, Once you have access to customers, there's a lot of products you can sell. Right? A telco today is doing telco, but honestly, an Airtel is today also doing advertising, right? Which is now entering into a space that was more Google and Facebook's, right? But can Google has significantly invested in Airtel and Geo, right? So it's everyone's sort of trying to be with everybody, and I think our realization is that it's very, very important to find more and more synergies. We do the offer aggregation extremely well, right? That's our USP. And when we go out to people who are saying that, look, we will continue to do this better than anyone else, the cost effectiveness of you trying to build and replicate everything that I've done is just not efficient. Let me offer it to you at a price that you just can't refuse. So today we all we actually run products for ICICI Bank. We run products for Mastercard. There are a bunch of other little sites that we run, and it's our way of preempting somebody maybe coming into our space, right? So today banks do offers, but a lot of those offers are powered by us. And this is something that we started doing about 6 years back, because we sort of had a foresight that they could come into our world. Might as well get them as our partners. Uh, in terms of how do you ensure that they stay with you? Uh, you just have to keep adding value. Tomorrow, if let's say a competitor of mine is able to give the same banks that I work with a larger bouquet of brands, I have a problem. Or if the rates that they're offering are better than mine,
More competitive than yours.
so I think it's constantly about how do you keep adding value. For many of you who might be listening to this, who are thinking of partnering with people like banks, etc. The one insight that I have is that with large entities, once you get in, uh, it's very hard. Like they don't give you up easily, right? Because there's so much integration and other things that happen. So it actually is a great place to be. Uh, but you have to keep doing your due value add, right, to keep this going.
Rohan, what happens if a player in an adjacent market suddenly develops uh, a same service or pivots to the same model. The example, I think, the most recent example was WhatsApp was a messaging service, and one day we all woke up to see a call button on the
Yep.
WhatsApp screen, and now that threatens the telco's
Yep.
model. Right, you're using WhatsApp to call, and the telco potentially loses revenue. They were your partners, but suddenly you're competing with them. What happens then if an adjacent player develops an ability that's same or similar to yours?
That's just how life is, right? And you
Okay.
know anyone who's building a business, right, I think the first thing one should understand and expect is that competition is going to happen, and it's going to come, and it's going to come in the most unexpected ways. If you look at businesses like Nokia or Kodak, uh, they were dominant industry changing businesses that don't exist, right? I think my niece, who's today 11 years, 12 years, will probably not have any understanding or context of what Kodak, Nokia, or, honestly, if somebody were to give one of those big telephone directories, right, somebody would look at it and say, what is this? Uh, and I just think that's how things are, right? Um, I think the only way to stay ahead and the only way to continue to survive is thinking about how are you continuing to add value. Uh, I think if you are leading a market, you will have opportunity to realize where competition is coming from and how to pivot. You may buy a company, you may change your model, right? And I think if you look at the history of businesses that have stood the test of time, who are, let's say, 100 years old, 200 years old, have been doing that. Today, one of the more existential threats that I see is towards, let's say, oil and gas companies. We are all now big believers in the EV market. And if you see, a lot of these companies are now going out and buying EV companies. They're buying battery manufacturers, right? So it's about how do you stay ahead of competition? How do you just figure out what is coming at you? And it doesn't just happen, the flash of a button, right? I think telcos could have seen this happen, right? Voice over internet started happening 20 years back. Skype calling was happening way before WhatsApp added this, right? Uh, Back in the day, ICQ was there, and that replaced chat as a service, and so many other things, right? Uh, the question is, why would a telco not have foresight and have invested or bought WhatsApp the way Facebook did, right? I think that is a master stroke from them. So I think it really is about continuing to stay nimble. Complacency is probably the biggest threat that companies have, large and small. I think the answer lies in being true to your mission statement. And I think as long as you're staying to that mission statement, you have a benchmark to keep doing better and better, right? If I think about what we're trying to do at Cashkaro, our objective is how do I make marketing more efficient? And if I have that mission statement, I never get to a place of complacency, because as long as I'm improving that, whether I am fifth, 10th, or number one, I'm constantly trying to better myself from the previous place, right? Um, I think what you're trying to avoid is a sense of stagnancy. And in our world, we had Cash Karo. We then said, look, how do I do this better? We did Earn Karo. We then created an offline business because we realized that while India is served, Bharat is not served. Uh, and I think that's the only way forward, right? You have a clear mission statement, and can you keep beating that? Because I think the problem you're alluding to is that there is no benchmark, right? You're not trying to do 10% better than my closest competition, right? You're just standing alone.
Okay, so Rohan, that explains how you understand, say, for instance, an adjacent competitor. Now, some time ago, a senior exec at Mercedes said that people investing in SIPs or systematic investment plans into mutual funds are actually competing with their ability to buy luxury cars. Now, what happens if a completely unrelated player starts competing with you? For instance, once upon a time, I guess companies like Minolta and Canon and all of them were competing with each other in the camera market, and
Yeah.
suddenly comes Nokia, which becomes the world's largest camera seller. Or, for instance, if you run an airline and you're competing with other modes of transport, Cisco's telepresence allows people to travel virtually. Now, an airline is competing with a router, for instance, or a networking company. How do you plan for this kind of competition?
I think it should keep every entrepreneur up at night, right? I think one has to keep looking at what's happening, what are the new trends. So for example, I'm subscribed to almost every startup report that comes out there, right? And I'm just looking at these companies, right? What do they do? In some cases, trying to figure out what are the synergies. So, for example, we work with all sorts of e-commerce companies, right? So now anyone who raises money should be a partner of ours, right? So that is one aspect of synergy. But equally, I'm following what else is happening, right? What other disruptions are happening, and constantly sort of thinking that, hey, is this good for me or bad for me, right? Is there something that can change? I think you then also need to have a strong team of leaders who can also help you think in that problem, right? I think with all the examples that you quoted, right, whether it's Canon or it was not the world does not change overnight. Uh, the change happens very slowly, right? And sometimes it is so slow that you don't even notice the change happen until it suddenly pivots on you. And I think that's where every CEO, business owner, entrepreneur should be allowed a certain amount of mind space to be obsessing over that. Right? I think that is really the job of somebody heading a company at CEO level or a co-founder level.
Okay, another word that we hear a lot of entrepreneurs and VCs use is the word moat. So I have
Uh-huh.
two questions for you. What exactly is a moat, and how do you go about building one and sustaining
Yeah.
it?
So, the moat is your USP, right? The moat is what will allow you to survive competition, which could come, as we've discussed, right, from any possible direction. Right? It could be, your immediate industry folks. It could be somebody that you never thought would come into your industry, etc. And I think it's the moat that sort of keeps you abreast, right? It keeps you above others. Now, if I talk about, let's say, what was our moat? You see, when we started off, we were entering into we were building a market. Right? There was no competition coming in. And at that point, the first moat that we ended up creating was going to our retailers and saying that, hey, we're moving the model in which you're going to pay us. You're not going to pay us per click, but you're now going to pay us per sale. So we took that model, then we said that, look, from the money that we're getting, we're going to pass some money back to the users as a cashback. Now, for the first time, users were getting cash back for their online shopping, right? So users said, hey, this is really, really good. So as more users started to come into that model, I was able to drive more sales to my partners. As I drove more sales to my partners, I went back to them and said, hey, you know what? I think I should get paid a little bit more. Now, as that flywheel started to turn, we were able to go out and raise some capital, right? So we did a Series A, then a B, then a C. Now, as we get more money, I get more users, I bargain better, I get more retailers. Now that automatically starts to build a moat for me because I start with a higher rate, right? So, for example, let's say if today somebody is coming into the cashback industry, while they can build everything that I have, right, at a technology level, but they fundamentally don't have users to begin with, right? So when they're starting off, they're probably starting off at base level, right, where I'm today sitting at, let's say, base plus 20%. And that creates my moat, right? That creates my competitive edge to keep managing that, right? Uh, my moat is also constantly thinking about how do I add more value, right? So constantly sitting with my partners saying, hey, what else do you want? Equally listening to my customers and saying, hey, what do they want? What are they liking or not liking about my product? And can I keep fixing those problems? Because, honestly, with all the reviews that come, you can analyze any app and you can know that where is this app doing really well and where is it failing. A lot of that information just publicly there. So it's kind of creating that, right? So I think therefore having enough levels of moat, right, and that moat could then be, over a period of time, your team becomes your moat. Because I think as Jim Collins said in his great book Good to Great, that having the right people on the bus is probably 90% of the battle, right? So as you get enough capital, you just have better talent. That better talent will solve the common industry challenges better, hopefully. uh, and I think that's really what why the uh, importance, and why I think every VC probably starts that conversation saying, "Hey, what's your moat?"
Rohan, do you use your competitors' products and services personally?
I do, and I think it's very very important. I think it's important to know how they're solving that problem. What is the experience that they're building? Uh, I think with every product there are certain challenges or experiences, right? So somebody sitting at Flipkart should probably see how is Amazon doing this, how fast do they deliver. In my case, we have competitors, and I want to see how is their experience, how are they communicating, how does that flow or the experience work, what happens on their app, are they able to, how quickly am I able to log in, how quickly do they track a transaction, how quickly are they paying me, what are the different modes that they're paying me in, right? So I think it's I think for anyone who's not looking at their competition, and honestly I think you need to know your competition's business as well as you know your own, and therefore, and the only way of doing it is to actually be using your competition's product often enough to get that flavor of what's happening.
Rohan, one of the words that you repeated multiple times
Mhm.
in this interview, and quite frankly, many other entrepreneurs in this series have used, is the word honest or honestly, or be honest with yourself, or some variant
Yeah,
of that statement. I have two questions for you. One, as an entrepreneur, why is it so hard to be honest with yourself? Is it because
yeah,
uh, this is your baby and you created it from nothing and therefore you're in love with it and it's hard to be objective? And the second follow up question is, how do you assemble a team of people who are able to tell you what you need to hear, but maybe you, as an entrepreneur, you don't want to hear?
yeah. Okay, that's a great question. I'll tell you the conundrum on the honesty part. When you start a business, right? Often, uh, so for example, if the opportunity was already solved, it wouldn't be an opportunity. So a lot of times when you're starting a business, you're sort of going against the tide, right? You're trying to build something that is usually hard, or not. So for example, when Google was doing what they were doing, I'm sure there were a lot of naysayers coming and saying that, hey, you're going to go against Yahoo, you're going to go against AOL, and all of these giants, right? How will you do it? When we started off, honestly, my parents were like, look, you and Swati are, at these wonderful high paying jobs in London. Are you sure you want to leave this and, have no income, no stability, right? Uh, and the honesty part comes in that you need to believe in that, right? And you need to, and because it's a conviction, right? You're in some sense fighting the odds. You need to continue to have that belief. I think through so many journeys, right? Whether you look at the Uber journey or the Google journey, or to some extent our journey, things don't just work out the way you think they will, right? You may have beginner's luck. That's just a reality. But then things start getting hard, right? And that's where you have to keep being honest on, do you still genuinely believe that you can solve this? uh, the minute things start getting hard, all your well wishers, right? And look, honestly, it's your friends and your family, right, who will probably be the first one to say that, look, are you sure this is the right thing for you to do? Right? Many of us have left good jobs to do this, right? And I think that's where there is this balance between having great conviction versus knowing that, look, I think it's time to accept, right? And the other part I think that's really really important, right, is that there is no, and there should not be any stigma for failing. And, honestly, if you look at giants like Amazon, they probably have close to 100 200 ideas that are failing every year, and they are failed experiments, right, not failed businesses, right? They're learning outcomes. The other part, right, that I think is really really important is uh, looking at numbers, right? Because that's the only fact, right? So, for example, in Cashcrow, one of the things that we're absolutely anti is anyone saying words like "we are doing well," "it was a good quarter." Right? There's no quality, right? You have to put a number to it, right? So if you say that, look, it was a good quarter, what does that mean, right? You set a target that, let's say the target was a 20% growth. Did you get 20, 21, 25, or 5? Right? And it just takes away any sense of objectivity to it, right? Or subjectivity to it, right? It is a very defined number. And I think data is your best friend, because the data will again help you determine at what point are you just being unduly optimistic, uh, and at what point do you keep fighting the battle. So I think data is really the answer.
All right. Now that completes the serious part of the interview. Let me ask you some personal questions. Now, what is your favorite brand war? Is it Pepsi versus Coke? Is it HUL versus P&G?
It's Apple versus PC, and it's a battle that I fight at home. Swati is a diehard Apple person. I am a PC person. Have always been.
Rohan, your wife is your co-founder. Do you compete with your wife?
Look, I wouldn't go into a battle that I know I can't win. My belief is that with co-founders, right, and whether it's husband wife or just co-founders, I think you need to compete, but also not compete, right? In the sense that I think the job of co-founders and the leaders in an organization, right, is to create an environment where we're sort of competing to get the best of each other. And that competition comes in very, very subtle ways, right? It could be competing on, somebody knows something more and there is a desire to learn. And look, we should also have that extra desire to learn, or somebody having certain skill sets and learning from each other those skill sets. And I think that done in the right way, I think competition is probably the biggest lever for change. So while a lot of what we've been talking about so far has been probably the slightly negative connotation to competition, I think on the positive side, that's the only way change happens, right?
Okay, that's good advice, both for startup founders and for husbands in general, I'm guessing.
Correct.
Rohan Bhargava of cashkaro.com, thank you very much for being part of ET Startup School.
Thank you so much for having me.
So that brings us to almost the end of today's class at ET Startup School. If you'd like to be a good student, check out and do the homework assignment in the show notes. If you like the podcast, share it with family, friends, even your frenemies. ET Startup School is produced by Animesh Das with inputs from Anupriya Nair, Erika D'Souza, Arijit Burman, Shilpa Sharma, Harish Chawla, Govind Mundra and Vishal Bhandari. ET Startup School is available on economictimes.com and ET Play, as well as Amazon Music, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, JioSaavn and Google Podcasts.